if you didn't get to hear the 5 or 10 minutes I talked about the Beatles, um, they they got terrible reviews. It was the experts that gave them the reviews. Of course, they went on to do some incredible things. So it kind of relates to today. It made me think about the Beatles when I heard a Beatles song, and I thought I would go ahead and start this whole thing. Um, and the idea is show me the proof. Show me the proof. And I'm going to begin with a long story. It's appropriate at this time of year, I believe. I think that it makes sense to talk about at this time of year because it is about the holiday season. It's rather long, so stay with me. I think it's relevant, and I hope you find it interesting. And while it may not exactly tie into investments, I think the whole thesis behind what I'm going to say does have relevance to investments. It's this time of year when TV and magazines and newspapers are full of what to buy and what to sell, what mutual funds to own, what mutual funds not to own, what ETFs to buy or sell. What's the outlook for 2026? The economy, the stock market, the bond market, alternative investments, Chinese and other foreign markets. And I have one thought through the whole thing. Show me the proof. What have you done before? So I want to begin with a story that has something to do with Christmas, and I'll get there. So believe me and stay with me during this period of time. And the story begins actually in 1893. 1893, in Russia. It was a family, a Jewish family, the Bilans. They were in Eastern Russia, and Russia was going through in the 1890s a cleansing, a population cleansing, and the pogroms were hitting the Jewish towns, the small villages that were where Jewish people lived, and they were burning the towns, they were driving the people out. And in 1893, it happened for the Bilan family. The Bilan family went through the pogrom and they headed off to New York. They fled to America. Israel Bilan was just 7 years old. He was one of 8 children, and his father was a cantor. And when they got to New York, his father continued in the synagogue to be a cantor. And I don't know if you've been in a synagogue through a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, or if you belong to a synagogue. But the cantor is someone that actually kind of chants through the Torah, the first 5 books of the Christian Bible. The Torah is the Jewish first 5 books. And his father was a cantor. The family was extremely poor. They came from nothing. They had nothing. And within 3 years of arriving in New York, the father died. So they went from extreme poverty to even worse. Israel, by then, one of 8 children, dropped out of school. He'd already dropped out of school by the time his father died. And he was selling newspapers on the street. And he was already a troublemaker. Ragged clothes. If you've seen the play or read the book about Oliver Twist, Charles Dickens' story, you get a kind of a picture of what Israel Bilan was like. He was living on the streets by his teen years, but he got a job in a restaurant in Chinatown in New York City. And it was not a very high-class place. And to entertain people, and as he was serving up the food and the whatever they served, he was singing little ditties, vaudeville ditties, things that were not very nice. It would have embarrassed his father. It would have really bothered his father. But things began to change when he got a job in 1906 at the Pelham Cafe. It was upscale, not like the Chinatown cafes. It was fashionable. And Bilan continued to croon little ditties. He was adored by the customers. Wyland had no training, no musical training, didn't read music, didn't write music, but he was adored. And he was adored by one producer of music who decided that he should write a song. And so he wrote his first song called Mary from Sunny Italy. And the publisher, as they were writing the song and doing the music and recording the notes on the paper, the publisher was drinking, and Israel Bylin was also drinking. The publisher was drunk. And when it came time to put the music sheet together, he misspelled. In his drunken state, he misspelled Bylin, Berlin. And instead of Israel, he called him Irving. And so Irving Berlin was born. And the young man continued for the rest of his life calling himself Irving Berlin. It's an incredible story, beginning of the 20th century. One of the greatest songwriters of all time. It was Irving Berlin who gave us the song, God Bless America. We sing that. Go to baseball games, sing God Bless America. So what does that have to do with Christmas? What does it have to do with this whole thing? So to understand, and I said from the beginning, we're going to get to Christmas. So fast forward to 1942. Irving Berlin by now was one of the most recognized producers of music in the world. He had his own publishing company, his own musical theater, and he was commissioned to write the score for a musical called Holiday Inn. It was a film that was going to be made in 1942. And one of the things that was happening in 1942, World War II is going on. The invasion in Germany, the Japanese, the invasion's going on, the GIs were overseas, and the government would put together a package, a care package for the GIs. And one of the things in that package was a record. On the A-sides were always expected to be the most popular music. B-side was just to fill the other side of it. And the A-side said, let's start the new year right, which seems so appropriate for the GIs overseas. But it was the B-side that caught everybody's attention, the GIs' attention. The GIs began to write home. They received the records in October. They began to write home and tell the people back home, you've got to buy this record. The B-side was a song sung by Bing Crosby called I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. It hit the top charts, went to the very top of the charts. In fact, that record became the best-selling record, sold over 50 million copies. It became the best-selling record, the two-sided record that's ever been produced. I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. That was what went on. During that period of time, or prior to that period of time, no one wrote songs about Christmas. You didn't have, why would some songwriter or lyricist write a song about Christmas when it was 1 month a year and then it was gone? You didn't have anybody writing, but suddenly in 1942, with I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas soaring to the top of the charts, by the next year, we began to see things coming out. In 1943, Walter Kent and Kim Gannon, another pair of Jewish people, wrote another song for Bing Crosby that was sent to the GIs and sent to people here called I'll Be Home for Christmas. Again, World War II was going on, but that song went to the top of the charts. In 1944, Judy Garland was playing in a musical called Meet Me in St. Louis. It was a Broadway musical. And the song of that was Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. It didn't start out that way. Meet Me in St. Louis was a musical that was about the Smith family. They were living in St. Louis. Everything was happy. They were looking forward to the World's Fair in 1904. That was what the musical was about. They were happy until the father got transferred to New York City. They were going to go to New York City. The girls weren't happy. And the original words to that song were, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas. It may be your last. Next year, we may be living in the past. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Pop that champagne cork. Next year, we may be living in New York." Judy Garland didn't like that. Judy Garland refused to sing that song. It was so downbeat, she changed the words to, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas. It may be your last. Let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight." And that's the record that was sent to the GIs in 1944 and became the top-selling record of 1944. 1945, the war was over, the GIs were home, and it was the beginning of the baby boomer generation. And now it became a generation when Christmas songs were being written. In fact, 2/3 of the songs we think of Christmas were written between 1945 and 1959 for the baby boomers and the baby boomer parents. Songs like "Let It Snow," "Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire," "Sleigh Bells," "Sleigh Ride," "Silver Bells," "Frosty," "It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas," "I Saw Mama Kissing Santa Claus," "Here Comes Santa Claus," "All I Want for Christmas Is Two Front Teeth," "The 12 Days of Christmas," "Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer," and "Blue Christmas." All of those songs written before 1953, in the 8 years following the war. The baby boomers were reaching their teens. Rock and roll was coming. Only one song has reached the proportion those songs reached. That was Mariah Carey, "All I Want for Christmas Is You." That's about half the songs. More than half the songs were written by Jewish songwriters and lyricists. You know, oops, I forgot to move the slides forward. Anyway, sorry about that. No one saw it happening. Sorry about that. The fact is, from 1945 to 1959, most of the songs were written by Jewish people. And that information is yours for the holidays. But the question is, everyone assumes that Christmas songs are written by Christian people. Most of them were written by Jewish people. And in investing, it's one thing to claim one thing when the opposite's true. And I want to challenge the assumptions. I said this was going to be about show me the proof. Each time the experts come out, it's a question that has to be asked, show me the proof. I ask that question all the time. I get things like this coming out. This is something that I read, I got in my emails and sent to me. This is something for an annuity. Wall Street hires really brilliant young MBAs, and they come out with some of these great ideas. Look at this. This is something they said, oh, look, 2000 to 2002, the dot-com bust, the S&P was down 37%, NASDAQ was down 68%, Russell down 20%. The index for worldwide companies down 41%. Look at 2003 to 2007. Look at where things were. They're talking about moving from one area to another area. And they're claiming that if you can move from one to the other, that's great. But they're saying that if you use dual direction, what they wanted to do in this annuity is that you could actually achieve better returns. Be in NASDAQ instead of the Russell 2000 or Standard & Poor's. Be in the Standard and Poor's in 2008, be in NASDAQ or the international companies in 2003 to 7, and be the smallest drop in 2000 during the dot-com times in the Russell 2000. All you have to do is guess when you're going to be there. It makes so much sense if you look in arrears, if you use 20% hindsight. You know, it's similar to what happens. You get these young MBAs who are hired into the marketing departments. They've never had the experience of managing money, but they come up with these great ideas and they put it out, and they put it out to retail investors. Retail investors pick it up. And for most people who buy this in an annuity, they won't realize how poorly they're doing for years and years. 10 years later, financial advisor will advise them to move from that annuity to another annuity so they don't have to pay for it. So all this, where is the proof? Where is the proof? Show me the proof. You know, one thing that you have to note is institutional investors love retail investors. I don't know if you're a business owner, a company executive, if you're a physician, if you're a dentist, if you're retired. Institutional investors love you. They really love the retail investors. And you know why? Because for every happy seller, there's a happy buyer. For every happy buyer, there's a happy seller. If you read any of the news literature, if you're reading the literature now, as they talk about what's happening, what to buy, what not to buy, what stocks are in, what stocks are out, what's going to happen for 1926, you'll see articles about what is smart money doing. What is the smart money doing? You know, that's the institutional investors. That's the algorithms. Do you know what they consider you? If you're listening to my workshop, I assume you're a retail investor. If they're the smart money, who do you think they consider dumb money? Why? Because when they want to sell, they're looking to retail investors to buy. When they want to buy, they're looking to retail investors to sell. You know, they come up with these ideas. And in marketing groups, they come up with these things. This is the Hefra plans. You know, it's an insurance kind of thing where they say, look at how the 401ks have done considering the Tefra plan, 6.9 versus 4.01. In 2000, they said the 401ks were down 1%. Actually, I don't know where they got that return because the Standard and Poor's was actually up 4%. But they came up with those numbers. I'm sure they figured out a way to do it. What's the 30-year track record? They show in 401ks 2.9%, their insurance product 4.5%. Actually, if you look at the Standard and Poor's for that 20-year time period from 2009 to 2019, Standard and Poor's was up 13%. 4.5, 2.9 seems kind of low, but they come out with this and they tell you, these are the numbers. All you've got to do is do a Tefra plan. You know, zero risk. I love it. Zero risk. Actually, it depends upon the type of risk. You may end up with this kind of insurance product, which has zero risk. And if you die, you have zero risk, you'll get your principal back. But in fact, if things go down and you cash out, you can end up with less cash. Saying that there's zero risk, you can't go down. In order to make that true, you have to die. Question is, you've got to ask the questions. What's real? What's not real? Show me the proof. Show me that these plans actually did this. Show me the data on 401ks that are this. I can show you data that's far, far different from this. I can show you the data from 2000 to 2009, where the Standard & Poor's was minus 0.7%. So by picking the data, they picked the data from 2000 to 2019, showing that 401ks were up 6% when the S&P was up 13%. Show me the data. Show me actual 401k data. Show me where that's from. Show me how a Tefra plan yielded 6.29 and where no one lost any money. Show me where people cashed out prior to maturity, where they didn't lose a bit of money. And if you can't show me that, then don't say there's zero risk. There's zero risk if. And you outperform if. In your 401ks, if you're invested in the Standard & Poor's 500, you're going to be far superior to this. Show me the proof. Show me the actual diversification works in actual numbers. Show me the actual accounts that actually performed. Give me the math. Show me the math. Don't show me hypotheses. Don't show me hypothetical numbers. You see a lot of people who are back testing. We back tested this for 140 years and it worked. But the market is not the same 40 years ago as it is today. These are questions that you should be asking. You should be asking not for hypotheticals, but real accounts. You need to ask for real accounts. Put them in, what questions are you asking? When you look at a new investment, what kind of questions are you asking? Put the questions in the chat right now. We're going to take a minute. What questions are you asking to ascertain what your investments are? What would you like to know? What are you asking? Chris, I'm not
All right,
seeing
Mike, I'm here keeping an eye on the chat.
I'm not seeing questions. Does that mean that you're not asking any questions?
Hmm.
Does that mean you just accept it on face value? You know, you should be asking questions. You should be asking what the real numbers are. Show me the proof. Show me it's real. Show me the reality. Because most times they really can't show you. The proof doesn't exist. They've back tested, they've made up a hypothesis, they've made up hypotheticals. They'll tell you the stories, they'll sell you the narratives, but they don't have the numbers. But even when they have the numbers, can you be sure? Can you be sure of what you're actually seeing? I started in this industry, got my license in 1986. 1986, I was a stockbroker. That's what we called financial advisors back in the old days, the good old days, as they say. And they weren't such good old days, but anyway. And when a stockbroker left the firm, what the firm would do, the manager of the firm would pass around the account information for the accounts of the stockbroker that left. And if you were a large producer, produced a lot of gross revenue, you got the best accounts. If you were a low producer, you got small accounts. I was brand new in the business. I inherited one single account, a person that 5 years before had invested $10,000 into a mutual fund. And when I got the account, I called the person. They didn't return my call. But the account had been invested at 10,000 and was now showing a value of 80,000. So I looked at that and I realized there's something funny going on. Actually, I didn't realize that until a wholesaler came into the office. And mutual funds have salespeople that go into the big offices of the wirehouse firms, and they tell you, or they actually come. Some will come to my office here, small, but they come and they sell you on a story. And in this particular case, the wholesaler came in and he's touting a 20% per year return in this mutual fund that my new client owned. And I look back and it was over the period of time, same period of time as my new client had owned the mutual fund. And while he was claiming a 20% per year return, I had to leave the meeting, go back and get the information from the client because the clients had invested 10,000. The account was worth only 8,000 at that time. And I'm asking the question, here's what my client invested. My new client, I just got this client, he invested 10,000. I can understand why they don't want to return a phone call. After 5 years, they're down 20%. But you're saying it earned 20% per year. Tell me what's going on. As it turns out, the mutual fund my client had invested in was a large mutual fund that hadn't done very well. So they merged it into a small fund that had averaged 20% per year, a much smaller fund, less than 10% the size of the big fund. And they merged the big fund into the small fund so they could claim the record of the small fund as being what it was for the large fund. Think about that. That's the way it works. That's the mutual fund shell game, what I call the shell game. Mutual funds performing poorly, merged into a small fund, and they keep the small funds. They market as if the history applies to everyone. Fundex did a study. There were 269 funds that had operated for 25 years. And yes, I realize my information's 10 years old, but I think it's still pertinent. At the time, 25 years prior to that, there had been 10,454 mutual funds and ETFs. Very few ETFs, but 400, most of the 10,454 were mutual funds. Some of the funds just completely died, didn't have much interest. They just closed out the fund and shut them down. But for a lot of funds, they merged into other funds. The Janus 20, just looking at the Janus family, the Janus 20 was merged into the Janus 40. The Janus International was actually liquidated. The Janus Fund itself was merged into Janus Research. So 2017 was a really bad year for Janus funds because they were merging all the poor performing funds into smaller funds that had a great track record. Every single year, I mean, think about it. 25 years before, and we're talking 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 2017 now, 10,454 funds 25 years ago. 10,454 funds. Only 269 survived. That means over 10,000 funds were either liquidated or merged into other funds. Started and merged. That's not a very good track record. And so when you look at track records that are published for how well professional money managers are doing, that's not a very good track record. Those 269 funds that survived all had very, very good track records. Some had low fees, some had high fees. There was no relationship compared to the fees that were charged. Some charged 8% commission up front. Some were 12B1 funds. Everyone, the fees didn't make a difference. It was the manager who made the difference. That's been my experience. The fact is, don't tell me the stories. I don't want to hear about market theory. I don't want to hear about back-tested hypotheticals. I don't want to hear about cherry-picked timeframes. I want to see the proof. I want to really see the proof. I want to know if someone tells me something about how something performs, I want to see the actual proof. I don't want to see things that are merged together. I want to see, if it's a mutual fund, the same manager who's managed for 10 years. If you're going to give me a 10-year track record, show me the same manager that's managed for 10 years. If you're going to give me a 20-year track record, show me the same managers that have managed for 20 years. Show me something where things aren't merged together. And if you're going to show me something that's back tested, I'm not going to buy it, because the conditions that were last year and 10 years ago are very different from today. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. If something, think about COVID-19 that happened in 2000, or you think about the Great Recession of 2000, 2008. Think about the things that have changed. Yeah, I used to talk about the changes that we saw in 2000, following 2007, 2008. And it's an old story by now, and it's probably stale. But I used to say, following that time period, if someone would have told you in 2007 that you were going to take a business trip or a personal trip, and you would fly into a new city, you'd get out of the plane, you'd get into a stranger's car who would drive you to a stranger's house where you would stay, you would have said that's crazy. But with Lyft and Uber, that's strangers driving those cars. And many people stay in an Airbnb. I mean, that became commonplace. Would not have happened in 2005 or 2004. If someone would have told you in 2019 there was going to be a little tiny piece of DNA, just a little tiny piece of DNA, just a speck of DNA compared to the human DNA. Uh, Human DNA, if it was the size of a string, would stretch from one side of the country to the other side of the country. This little tiny piece of DNA would be less than 12 inches long. That little tiny piece of DNA would kill over 7 million people, would shut down businesses worldwide, and kill over a million people. If someone would have told you that in 2019, you would have said they were crazy. No, those things happen, and those change the investment scenario. It's a dynamic scenario that changes all the time. So if you're talking about hypotheticals, if you're talking about back-tested theories, back-tested performance, don't try to sell me those ideas. They don't work. And in fact, if you look at a lot of the back-tested information, it doesn't work. Does not work. It hasn't worked going into the future. Just like Irving Berlin gave us Christmas songs we didn't expect, and those Jewish people who wrote the songs and gave us Christmas songs, the truth may not be what you assumed, but knowing the future really protects the future. The idea is to talk about proof, not about stories. Don't tell me how good you are or what's going to happen. Show me the best thing going forward. In our industry, we legally have to say past performance is no guarantee of future performance. But if you look at the reality, it may not be a guarantee of future performance, but past performance is the best indicator of future performance. Look at it. So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk and give you some proof. My gift today is the story of Christmas and talk about proof. I'm going to share because I will give you past performance. Doesn't guarantee future performance, but here it is. These are the clients of Adams Financial Concepts compared to the Standard & Poor's. Most weeks I put up the chart that shows how we compare to the average financial advisor, but we don't measure ourselves against financial advisors. There, we win the race by a long shot. We compare ourselves actually to the Standard & Poor's 500. Why the Standard & Poor's 500? Because it's the most difficult index over the long term to beat. The very most difficult. Why the Standard & Poor's 500? Because the smart money, the smart money, those professional investors, those institutional investors, those algorithms, the very best of them, the very, very best, 1 or 2 or 3% are able to perform as well as we do. 1 or 2 or 3% outperform the Standard & Poor's 500. You know the people, the Buffetts, the Templetons, the Prices, the Lynches, and some of the new people as well. Outperforming the Standard & Poor's, it's the most difficult thing. And we do as well as the Standard & Poor's 500. In fact, we're a little bit above. And if we finish this quarter, as I expect to, we'll be even further ahead. That's where we stand. We've had some good times, we had some bad times, but if you look at where we are, we're 16 years into this, almost 17 years. 500,000 grew to 5.4 million. That's the Standard & Poor's 500. Let me tell you about what this is. This is the composite of our equity accounts, our client accounts. Does not include our profit sharing accounts. It includes conservative accounts. It includes a few aggressive accounts. Most of the accounts are moderate. And most of the accounts are the ones which make up the huge portion of this performance. And we include every single equity account that is not a profit sharing account, is not a bond that doesn't contain bonds. These are how the accounts perform. Every single account that started before I started Adams Financial Concepts is included in this if they're still active accounts. Every account that has at least 1 quarter of data, 1 full quarter, is included. There are people that have passed away. Those accounts during that entire time that they were living are included in this. There are accounts where the client moved away. There's a few of those. For whatever reason they moved. Those are included for the full time they were being managed by Adams Financial Concepts. All new accounts are there. I've heard advisors say, I don't post results because people start at different times. True. True for us as well. They say they have different criteria. Some are more conservative, some are more aggressive. True. All those are included in what I do. This is the proof. This is the proof of what we do. This is the proof that what we do has been good. And yeah, we had a big rush up at one time, followed by a down period. But if you look at this, that's a pretty consistent line. And if you look at something else, this looks like a line that's beginning to accelerate. I use this story sometimes of if you were given the choice of having $1,000 a day for 30 days, or the choice of starting with 1 penny that would double every day for 30 days, what would you choose? Would you choose $1,000 a day? Or would you choose a penny doubling every day? Fact is, at the end of 30 days, $1,000 every day will give you $30,000. You know what a penny doubled every day for 30 days will do? On the 30th day, you'll have $10 million. But if you look at that, half of that came on the last day. 3/4 came in the last 4 days. 90%, no, 3/4 came in the last 2 days. 90% in the last 4 days. That is, I have to wonder, look at this. The growth seems to be accelerating upward. Is that going to happen with the S&P 500? Is that going to happen with Adam's financial concepts? I don't know. Past performance is no guarantee, but past performance is probably the best indicator. That's what we are. That's the proof. Show me the proof. This is not hypothetical. This is not back tested. These are real accounts. These are the clients of Adam's financial concepts. Every single one. There's conservative, there's a few aggressive, and mostly moderate accounts. There are people that are taking income out of the account. They're taking a steady stream, the same stream every year. They don't take the fluctuations. The stream continues month by month by month, and usually that stream is increased over a period of time. That's a steady stream of income, and we want people to have more money at the end of their lives than they started with now. We do not want our clients to run out of money. That's a focus. We've never had that happen. We want our clients to continue, and some are taking money out, a few are still accumulating money, but that's where we are, outperforming the Standard & Poor's 500, fewer than 3% of money managers. The smart money do that. So if the smart money is in this time frame, if that's smart money, and they consider that smart money, and they consider retail investors, most retail investors dumb money, I have to say, my clients must be brilliant investors. They must be the brilliant money, because there's not very many people that are doing as well as my clients. I just have to say that. It's the end of the year. We're going to see the final numbers for this year, and I think they're going to be very good. I just had to pat myself on the back. Sorry, that's what's going on. That's the curve that I normally show how we do compared to the average financial advisor. We do much, much better. And of course, I always have to say, these are the disclaimers. Past performance is no guarantee, but it's the best indicator. We use dividends. We use the Standard & Poor's 500 with dividends invested. That's the curve that I showed. It includes all active accounts and their net. The curve I showed is the actual value of the client accounts. After all fees have been deducted, after management fees, after cost, after all expenses are direct, that's what the clients got. Don't include the performance incentive accounts. And yes, we tend to be fully invested because I like the Peter Lynch quote, because I don't want to be caught with my pants down. Not saying that I will always be there, but for most time I am. So with that, let me ask questions and discussions. What are your thoughts?
All right, Mike, here is a question. Oh, hey, everybody, it's Chris Prouty. I am back to relay your questions to Mike. So if you have any, you can put them in the webinar chat. Mike, somebody asked if you can explain the difference between a mutual, or sorry, not a mutual, but a fund's return and their actual return.
I'm not quite sure.
So if a fund is showing a certain return, I'm going to try to interpret this. If a fund is showing a certain return, would that be their exact or their actual return, or could there be a difference between a fund's return and their return?
So that is the actual fund return. The question is, has there been a mutual fund merged into that?
I think that's what they're asking.
There's no way to know. If you own a fund and they change the name of the fund and you suddenly see your new fund have really good returns, you know that you've been screwed, to put it frankly.
Okay.
In financial terms, yes, you invested in a poor fund to begin with, and they want to cover that up.
Okay. Mike, another question is, I'm close to retirement. Is it too late to be thinking about this?
Close to retirement, is it too late to
to be thinking about the things that you're talking, I guess the things that you're talking about today.
Um, it depends on your age.
Hmm.
If you're retiring at age 102, it's probably too late. If you're retiring in your 60s, you may have another 30 to 40 years to live. I mean, if the average life expectancy is 80, and average life expectancy doesn't mean half the people die before and half the people die afterwards. The actual expected life expectancy, over half of the people will live longer than that. So you have to think about what you're going to have, not just in the next 5 years. You have to think about what you're going to have in the next 20 years or 15 or 30 years or 40 years. How long will you live? I'm 82 years old. I expect to continue to work for another 10 years. I
Mm.
expect to continue doing this. When my father was my age, he'd been dead for 21 years. He died at the age of 61. And when he died, or when he finished, he was planning to retire at age 62. One of the options they had was a 5-year annuity for their pension plan. 5 years. Because in the 1970s, a lot of people died within 5 years of being of retirement. Today, so many people are going on to live into the age of 100. The fastest growing segment of our society is the people over age 100.
Hmm.
There have been studies now, they're talking about doing studies on what they call the super agers. Those are the people that continue to work into their 80s and 90s and even into their 100.
Hmm.
You know, I like what I do. I love what I do, and I do it really well. I'm going to continue as long as I can. So it's not too late to begin. It would have been better to have started yesterday, but the next best time is today.
And for the people who are asking if they can ask Mike a specific question about their situation, I've included Mike's email in the chat. You can find that if you look in the chat, you can see I wrote, you can email Mike at, and then I put his email address. He checks his email and answers every single one. So you can email him there. And then if you would like to watch replays of our broadcasts, they are published to the YouTube channel. And the second chat that I put into the chat is the link to the YouTube channel that has dozens of hours of educational information for you. And it's where we put the replay of these broadcasts, usually by the following Monday. And Mike, with that, I don't have any additional questions for you. If anybody has a question, you can put it into the chat or the Q&A. And Mike, I have a question, as I ask every single week. We're not here next week, Christmas. We're not here the week after New Year's. So 3 weeks from today, Mike, have you thought about what the upcoming topic would be?
I have. Are you ready for your quarterly or annual meeting with your financial advisor?
Hmm.
If today says anything, 2 gifts I give to you
Haha.
for the holiday season. One is the story of how we got all those Christmas songs. The second thing is ask the questions, show me the proof. Don't just listen to what your financial advisor says. Ask him the questions, ask him the hard questions. Ask her to show the proof
Yeah.
of what they say. They're going to give you a quarterly meeting. They're going to show you Monte Carlo simulation. They're going to show you all sorts of things. Where is the proof? Monte Carlo simulation, by the way, is a bad statistical thing for the market. Ask them, where's the proof that it really works?
Hmm.
Because it hasn't in the past. Ask the hard questions. Are you ready for your quarterly or annual meeting with your financial advisor? I'm going to bring up questions you can ask. I'm going to talk about what goes on in those meetings. And by the way, I never do quarterly meetings with my clients. They've come to rely on the performance, not the meeting. So anyway, that's coming up in next year. it will be the 8th of January.
8th of January.
So,
Wow. Well, Mike, that's a wrap. Everybody who's here today, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be with us. I'm super, super grateful for it. Mike, what a great time we've had in 2025 doing these. Looking forward to more in 2026. And Mike, with that, I'll hand it over to you. As always, you get the final word.
well, thanks for being here. Thanks for staying with me through the long stories. Thanks for listening to what I have to say. I do believe that it's a thing to show me the proof. Please do ask the right questions when you're taking advice from anybody or listening to smart money. Know that they consider you dumb money. So uh, they consider financial advisors dumb money. So anyway, ask the right questions. Think about what you want to do. And we have podcasts about money radio. Go to the podcast, look at some of the past workshops, the past podcasts, and subscribe. And thanks for being here. Happy holidays. And I hope you have a very wonderful and prosperous new year. Take care, and we're done for today.